I'm fortunate enough to be able to work from home during this whole pandemic thing, but my office is getting a little bit out of control because I wasn't really set up to work from home. I'm stopping right in the middle of this workbench build to build some shelves to get myself a little more organized in my workspace. I'm building them in the same style as that podcast desk that I built a little while ago, so I'll link to that video here. But I'm also going to be building this build with just 3 tools: a circular saw, a drill, and a jigsaw. Let's jump into it. So this project is sponsored by Diablo, and I'm going to be using their drill bits here, the jigsaw blades, and then of course their circular saw blades. The amount of carbide you're going to get on a Diablo circular saw blade versus really any other brand in a similar price point is just a whole nother level. Plus they have these little cutouts that are going to help to cool the blade as it cuts. It's going to help keep it from warping or breaking. It's just going to make it a lot better tool. So these are the base designs we're working for. I'm going to have 4 shelves. It's going to be 3 full shelves. Well, 2 full shelves and 1 2/3 shelf. And then it's going to have a box here in the middle. It's going to be about 2 feet by 2 feet. And that's going to allow me to have just a little display area. We need to cut some of the pieces of those, get this all screwed together. It's all going to be simple, just using iron pipes with the flanges to hold everything in place and then screws to hold together all the boxes. Real straightforward. So I'm going to start by cutting these things to length. I got 8-foot timbers and I only need 6 feet of them. Not critically important that the edges are square, so I'm just going to cut them off the raw edge and I'll just sand the edge at the end. So that's basically the square, how it's gonna look. So I'm just gonna screw through the top here, attach it with screws, some glue, and then sand it all up and get that done. So that's gonna be the box. 2 of these are gonna be full shelves. I need to trim down 1 and then cut 1 more shelf. Gotta figure out what the lengths are for all that. Now what we're gonna do is we're gonna use the jigsaw to cut just a couple little like round offs here in the edges, just so there's no corner to get yourself snagged on. So I'll be using these double cut blades from Diablo. They're supposed to give you an ultra fine finish on the wood. It's because they cut on the downstroke and on the upstroke of the jigsaw, so theoretically you shouldn't get as much tear out. So we'll go ahead and cut these now. All right, so I measured the positioning of the studs and I marked them on my tape so that I could mark those out on the board. And I'll just transfer those marks onto this. These are just the centers for the holes I'm gonna drill out for the pipes. Once I drill these first set of holes, I can use these to mark the other ones. I can actually use them to drill the other ones, so that'll be nice. Although these are 1/2-inch pipes, the diameter of them is actually closer to 1 inch. I can probably go down to 7/8 to give myself a little bit of extra wiggle room. But I think the steel quality on Diablo just stays sharp a little longer. Freud's really known for that. But like on their Spade bits, they've got these nice scoring teeth that are gonna help you not to get as much blowout on the entry hole. They've also got a lead screw that's gonna make sure that it kind of goes in straight. They've also got some interesting little geometry on the Spade bits that's gonna get you a little bit cleaner hole. I'm also gonna use this other cool thing. I'm going to use a drilling jig. You don't have to use this because we do have a little bit of play, but this is just gonna give me a little bit of extra error reduction. So this makes sure that your drill bit goes square into your workpiece. So the base plate here sits against your workpiece, then your drill mounts into the top here. All right, so I've got my whole center marked there. I'm just gonna drill in now. What's nice is once we drill this big one, we can use this as a drill template for the rest of our holes. So what I'm doing is I'm drilling through until just the tip comes through the other end. That way I can come back through the other end to get a nice clean punch out from the other side without any tear out on the back end of these cuts. Now when I drill through these, it should just punch through into my other hole. There we go. See, perfectly punched through. I'm gonna sand these corners 2 at a time, just so they end up consistent. In the video where I made the podcast desk, I applied some stain, and I'm gonna do the same thing to match with these. So I'm gonna walk through that process in a little bit more detail in this video. So I've sanded this to 180 grit so far. So I started with 80, cleaned up all the machining marks, took it through to 180 just to smooth it out a little bit. Now what I'm gonna do is just gonna pop the grain just by getting it wet, and then I'm gonna wipe it down. What this is doing is any of the little pieces of grain that are detached from the main piece, this is gonna make those stand up once they dry. Then you sand those down with 220 to knock it down. This is gonna prevent you from getting splotchy finishes on pine and spruce and a lot of the softwoods, as well as cherry. This is one of the most important steps if you're planning on staining your woods. I usually like to bring a little bit more warmth in them or things like that. Super easy step, no need for any like sanding sealer or pre-treatment or anything after you do a step like this. All you're doing, like I said, is just popping that grain, letting that stand up, and then you're just gonna knock it down to get a nice smooth surface to stain. So now we're gonna knock together that little box. It's gonna go in the middle of this thing. Okay, so we've got our box put together. It's all flushed up. Nothing crazy in the joinery department, just a pretty simple box. We've got to finish up our sanding, then we start putting some finish on this. So I talked you through why we popped the grain and how we're gonna get an even stain finish. I'm gonna use the same stain I used on the last project, this Varathane wood stain golden pecan. I think it brings out just a little bit of the warmth in the spruce type lumber on this. And then I'm gonna use a nice coat of a water-based poly product. This is Polywave from Vermont Natural Coatings. That's gonna be my water-based clear coat on top of that for protection. I'm just gonna brush both these on, so shouldn't take too long. Let's get it. So when you're staining, you would think you're like painting on the stain for the color, but really what you're doing is you're applying it to the surface and letting the surface react with the stain, and that's what actually gives you the color. You really just apply it, let it sit for a minute, and then just wipe it right off, and that should give you the color. And if you want it darker, you do it again. If you want it lighter, you vary the time between applying it and wiping it off. You can get nice consistent color like this, no splotches, pretty easily if you prepare right. Okay. So all the stain's applied. Now we just need to clean off the pipes, get those started assembled, and then we can put some clear coat on this, start putting this thing together. So I'll wait for the stain to dry. I'm gonna clean up all these little pipes. The steel, it's designed for gas typically, but these come with a machine oil on them. Best way to get rid of that is just a little bit of steel wool and acetone. So I'm just gonna work through all these pieces and just get them cleaned up with acetone so that I don't have anything to deal with later. Before I install them, I'm gonna put a coat of lacquer on top of them just so they don't rust, because these are steel pipes, so they'll oxidize over time. But I'm just gonna have at this while we wait for the stain to dry, and then I'm gonna put a coat of polyurethane on top of the wood, and then we'll start putting this thing together. All right, so it was harder than I thought, and I look a little bit like a coal miner, but I cleaned up all of these pipes. I've also got them kind of pre-fit in the configurations that I'm gonna need them for when I actually put this thing together. I still need to put finish on the stained pieces that are gonna make up the shelves and the box, and then we can probably put this inside. So we're in the home stretch, almost there. I'm gonna put some finish on this stuff, and then we're gonna go install it. I wanted to wait until the stain was fully cured until I put on the coat of water-based poly. Water-based poly dries really quick, but I didn't want it to reactivate or smudge or smear the stain at all. So I gave it about an hour to let this stuff fully set up before I put on the poly. So I'm using this from Natural Coatings Polyway. It's actually a cheese derivative, so it's edible. I'm not gonna eat it, but you could. It dries real nice. It's a good water-based. It probably discolors the least of any polyurethane like it that I've used. Most of them have at least some sort of like color tint to it. This one has almost none. So while the finish was drying on the wood, I went ahead and started installing the pipes into the wall. I'm drilling into the studs on 2 of the locations, but on the 3rd location, I actually have to end up going into 2 50-pound wall anchors per bracket. I'm getting almost 200 pounds for that side, and it's not really actually bearing any weight, so that should be fine, but that was a screw up on my part from mismeasuring the studs. Overall though, these brackets, the weight is pretty evenly distributed across the 4 contact points. So there's not really anything that's going to have heavy load on it unless I put 400 pounds on the shelves. I used the little brackets that you would use to mount a steel pipe into a wall to bear the weight of each shelf. And I also use those to attach into the wall as brackets. I also use the 90-degree elbows to connect each of the corners as I rounded back towards the wall at the bottom. To make the floating box look work, I used 2 French cleats into a stud, and with 4 screws into those French cleats, this box is probably the strongest portion of the whole build. I stocked the shelves with a bunch of mementos and curios that kind of keep me inspired in my office, including a couple of my favorite books from the great Nick Offerman. I really like the way these shelves turned out, and as suspected, since the build went so smoothly, the installation was a little rough. That's my fault. I mismeasured for a couple studs and drilled holes in the wrong location, but a couple heavy-duty wall anchors and we're good to go. It's all installed and set up now. I really love the way the shelves work together with that podcast desk. I'll link the video for that podcast desk if you want to see that build in the first link down below the like button. And if you want to see more videos like this, be sure to like the video, comment on it, do all the things that YouTube wants you to do, and then get subscribed and hit that alert button so that you'll make sure you get notified whenever I release a new video. I enjoyed building this and I hope to share more of these videos with you. Remember, keep your tools sharp and keep your mind sharper.